Hello, everyone. Good afternoon on this wonderful Saturday. We're so happy that you can join us here today. My name is Cassandra Cavness, and I am the Development Assistant for the Montgomery Museum of Fine Arts, located in Montgomery, Alabama. And today's event, Artists and Activism, Disability in the Arts, is sure to be a wonderful conversation between museum professionals, artists, and teachers. And we're just so happy that all of you could be here with us to join us today for this talk. We have a wonderful program lined up for you guys today. So what we're going to do is I'll introduce a little bit. Each panelist will have a chance to talk about their art, their passion, what they do for activism, and then we'll transition into a moderated panel. And then at the end, there will be a Q&A session. So we encourage you all to comment in the comment box. I will be checking that throughout the entirety of the program, and I will make sure we get your questions in to the panelists. So please, we do encourage you to engage with us in that way. We also want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, BBVA, for being able to bring this program to you today. Our panelists are a wide ranging. We have one in Maryland, one in Georgia, and one in North Carolina. And of course, I'm here in Alabama today. So we're all up and down the East Coast here, but we are excited to bring this talk to you today, and we are excited to talk about disability and the arts. So the first person that I'm going to introduce you to today is Marketa Johnson. She is a textile artist and a quilter living in Stone Mountain, Georgia. She's been pursuing a career as a professional artist, living with a disability for over 20 years. Marketa is also a teaching artist, presenting inclusive arts integrated programming for students K through 12th grade, young adults, and seniors. Marketa?
Yes, thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to share, Cassandra. Let me share my screen. Okay. Here we go. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. And I'd like to apologize at the beginning if there are any technical difficulties on my part in sharing my PowerPoint with you. Now, I have been living with my disability, or living differently, as I like to say, for over 30 years. And I've had a number of experiences that have been challenging, but that has also brought me to higher levels of understanding and self-awareness. During the coronavirus shelter-in-place mandate here in Georgia, I had a lot of time to think, and I did a lot of thinking about who am I? One of the conclusions that I came up with was, I'm not who I say I am, but I am what I do. So I'm a teaching artist, I'm a quilter, I'm a textile artist. I consider myself a multi-sensory artist. I'm a writer and I'm a blogger. As I said before, always wondering and thinking, where do I fit in? How can I share the goodness that is within me? How can I share my intellectual strength? How can I share all of my soft abilities with my community to bring out good? I had to realize and come to an understanding that even though I am a woman and I am an African-American woman living differently, that I fit in just like everyone else. And this is the message that I try to bring to my students, to my friends, associates, and colleagues. I come from a family of creative people, hands-on people that love to make things, to do things, and to share. These three images are works of art created by some of my family members: my grandmother, my son, and my sister. We all are makers, and we carry on our family tradition of sewing. This is an image of yo-yos. Yo-yos are quilt embellishment or a single type of quilted item that you could connect and make things with, or you could take them and use them as embellishments on quilts. Now, this was the first thing that my grandmother taught me. And she showed me how to do this because she said, "Marquetta, you're too fast. You need to slow down." Now, my grandmother began my journey of self-realization and actualization through creativity. These are some of the first works of art that I made. In the middle, you'll see this image, and it is called Bees Love Honey Too. It's a painting of a woman in a beehive surrounded by bees in a field of flowers. And I said, bees love honey too, speaking about the beauty of African-American women and how even the bees love honey. And then I have a patchwork quilt that I did that was kind of improvisational that I did with some of my textiles. And then on my right, there's a quilt that is black and brown and tan and blue that is done in strips and patchwork. And it is black and blue as well on the border. Initially, when I started my creative journey, I started as a textile artist, simply wanting to dye, print, paint fabric that designers and other artists would use. And I pursued and I studied and I apprenticed with other artists until I gained some kind of understanding. However, early on in my textile work, I discovered that these textiles aren't just something that's beautiful that could maybe be put in a piece of wearable art. I discovered that they also look wonderful in quilts. These are samples of some of my hand-printed work. In addition to me loving to make different kinds of things and do tie-dye or stamping, I also like to do block printing. And so these are some samples of that. Now, this is around the time that I would say that my true artist activism started coming into play. I wasn't born with a disability. An unfortunate occurrence brought me to this situation. But fortunately, I had people that supported me. I was able to plug in to different organizations like VSA International out of the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., and then my local affiliate, VSA Arts of Georgia, my rehabilitation hospital. All of these organizations work to help me to be able to feel confident enough to use my creativity and move forward. Now you see this sunflower, that was one of the first types of things that I did. And you'll see in my work a focus on flowers, plants, and things in nature, because I feel that just like a flower grows, we grow like plants too. On my right, you'll see a floral arrangement. This quilt was seen by the people at our local transportation organization called MARTA. They loved this quilt and they put it on the front of their magazine. When they put this quilt on the front of their magazine, it opened a door for me to do so many different kinds of things. I had an opportunity to even be able to write a book inspired by my hand-dyed quilts. And this is a cover of my book. Now, in order for something wonderful and amazing like this to happen, my grandmother always told me this, and it rang true in this instance. She said, Marquetta, you cannot get ready for the big moment. You have to be ready for the big moment. So when Sterling Publishing out of New York contacted me about writing this book, I already had a gallery of work. I already had a gallery of textile work. So all I had to do was write the book and to develop the book. And this gave me a platform to be able to share on an even more dynamic basis. Now, when I did this book, when you open the cover, you're going to see a picture of me with a bouquet of sunflowers, because I love sunflowers. But more so than that, you're going to see a picture of me in my wheelchair. And I try to make it a point that every time someone does a picture of me, that they take a picture of me in my wheelchair, because I want to model the type of behavior and character so that others that are living with different challenges or that might not be living with similar challenges could be inspired by my brilliance and professionality to know that everyone can strive and be successful. These are two of the types of quilts that I do. I like to do improvisational patchwork, and I also like to do applique. Now, this is a technique that my grandmother taught me. She didn't see a quilt book until she was over 85 years old, but she had her own techniques, and she said, Marquetta, I'm gonna sew something on this quilt. So she would show me how she did it. And I took her technique and took it to another level by adding buttons and beads and using different types of fabrics. Now, these are two pictures that are close to my heart that I wanted to share with you all. On my left, there's a picture of me before coronavirus teaching at the High Museum of Art here in Atlanta. I work with young children from the age of kindergarten to 12th grade. And I had an opportunity to live as a woman that might have been living differently, but still in positions and situations that I could share in a meaningful way in my community. And so I feel that working as a person living with a disability in itself is a type of advocacy, because you're getting out there and you're showing people that, hey, I might be living differently, but I'm still living large. Oh, let me go back. I forgot to share one thing. Okay, the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. really supports people that are living with disabilities and have many programs for children ranging from the age of K through 12. The Kennedy Center invited me one summer to come to share creativity at a family day that was being held at the Smithsonian American Museum. And I just took that shot just to remember that moment. I also work doing some advocacy work with the NAMES project, the AIDS Memorial Quilt Foundation. I'm a panel making facilitator, and I work with families and friends that want to develop panels for their loved ones and friends. And so here on the floor, you could see a panel I just finished. Normally, I work with other people. On this particular quilt, I worked with my apprentice, Miss Aisha Lumumba, and she kind of helped me because actually it's kind of big. It's about 6 feet by 5. And you could see on my right how it was incorporated into a larger panel that, and each of these panels are usually somewhere around the size of 6 feet by 9 feet. At the High Museum, I had the wonderful opportunity to take on a commission to create objects for their sensory room, a place where families that might have children that are living with autism or that need a quiet moment for whatever reason, they could go to this room and they could engage with some of the things that I made that are really tactile. Oops, wait a minute. Let me go back. Okay, I just wanted to show you these items because through the High Museum, I had an opportunity to work with students at the Center for the Visually Impaired. Now, about 2 years ago, one of the things that was really, really hot with all of our kids was these things called fidgets, okay? And they had this little thing that they could spin around, you know, and whatever. But I wanted to make some handmade fidgets. And so these are some examples of some of the things that I made that students could use and that also could be in that sensory room for families and children to engage with. Oh, wrong way. Sorry about that. Okay, so my friends, I only had a minute to share. So if you would like to get to know me a little bit better, you can visit my website at www.marquettabquilting.com. You could also, if you feel a need to get in touch with me, at marquettabquilting@gmail.com. You could check out a lot of the things that's going on with me on Facebook and Instagram at Marquetta B. Quilting. And finally, you know artists live by their work. So you could always contact me at my Etsy store, marquettabquilting.etsy.com. And I would like to thank everyone for giving me an opportunity to share. And have a great day.
Thank you so much, Marquetta. The work that you're doing is so great, and I love the fact that you are working with children and you're showing children that, you know, no matter where they're at in life, no matter what happens to them in life, you know, you can still pursue your dreams. You can still do what you want, and I think that is so, so inspiring. And I think that kind of rolls into our next panelist. She kind of embodies the same way of living. Jennifer White Johnson is an Afro-Latina disabled designer, educator, and activist whose visual work explores the intersection of content and caregiving with an emphasis on redesigning ableist visual culture. She's worked within disability design advocacy initiatives with companies like Converse, Twitter, Google, and Nike. Her activist work has been featured in the Washington Post, Afropunk, and is permanently archived at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Jennifer?
Hello, everybody. Yes, thank you so much, Montgomery Museum of Art, for holding space for all of us today. Thank you, Marketa. That was so beautiful. I think that it's always important for disabled artists to continue to shine, and I don't think that Black disabled women who, as you said, live differently, that they often get praised and that they often really get the opportunity to show like how much they can do and how much soul is like really embodied in like our artwork and our process. So I really appreciate everything that your work really embodies, and it's really it's an inspiration to for me, as as a mother, as an artist, to be in the same space. So I really appreciate you helping to kind of set the tone for what I'm also going to be sharing. So what's up, everybody? My name is Jen Johnson. I'm actually going to be sharing my screen as well to show you a lot of artwork. Just a quick image description for those who have low vision. And for folks that are blind, I'm an Afro-Latina. I have kind of like chocolate cinnamon skin, and I'm wearing a gold shirt that actually is one of my designs, and it's a Black power fist, and it says Black Disabled Lives Matter in kind of like a very heavy weighted thick font. And in the actually intertwined within the Black power fist is the neurodiversity symbol, which really represents which is a universal symbol for autism, folks who live with ADHD and various neurodivergent cognitive disabilities. And I am a disabled woman. I have an autoimmune disorder, and I also have ADHD. So I'm always super excited, super chatty, and so I'm gonna try my best to slow down as I'm transitioning through all these slides that I'm gonna show. And I also have a stutter, so I just want to be super transparent about how I communicate. Because that has an impact on everything that I do. All right, so let me get my screen shared here really quickly. And Cassandra, make sure at any time, like tell me like, hey, like we can see your screen or we can't, just to kind of make sure that it's that it can be visible. So I'm gonna stop the share. I'm going to reshare it again because I remember that's what I had to do earlier. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. So I'm an Afro-Latina, I'm a caregiver, I'm an educator, I'm a disabled artist, and my work is really rooted in designing for collective liberation. It's really about freeing people to just be their true, authentic selves, especially those who identify as being disabled. All right, so okay. So my design practice, as I said, is really rooted in exploring the intersection of content and caregiving, with an emphasis on redesigning culture that is ableist. So culture that really oppresses disabled folks, that really, polices their bodies, their abilities, that really is rooted in oppressive nature, and not letting disabled people feel like they can have the power and can have the autonomy over their own way of existing. Oftentimes ableism is very much rooted in, well, because you can't walk, or because you can't move, or because you move differently, or you express yourself differently, that means that you belong over in this space where you can kind of be ignored and not necessarily viewed as a productive asset to society and to design and to activism. So my artwork is really rooted in making sure that that disabled folks really just feel seen and that they feel really empowered. And so in addition to my own personal design practice, I also teach. I teach currently at Bowie State University, which is a historically Black college in Maryland. And I really believe that the classroom, whether I'm, teaching, my design students in higher ed, or whether I'm doing workshops within the community, my teaching practice is really rooted in building a very accessible and justice-centered pedagogy and curriculum, which means that my main focus is on care and collective participatory approaches to learning. So making sure that the students feel that they can really bring their whole selves into the classroom, and that they feel cared for within a learning space. Because I feel that that's really paramount to being an educator, is making sure that students feel that they are genuinely seen and that they are cared about, that their perspectives are cared about, that their opinions are cared about within the classroom. So access is super paramount and super important, and it's not just a practice, but it's a practice, and it's not necessarily a place. Being access centered is more than just a checklist. It means that we're committed to disability justice in everything that we do, especially within art spaces, and language justice. So making sure that the artwork and the design work that we do communicate is filled with language that really uplifts people and that really doesn't try to oppress people. So these are some of the common narratives that we see when it comes to Black lives who are disabled. So my son, and I'm going to talk about my son in a second, who's 8 years old. He's autistic. One of the things that I would constantly see as a mom when it came to the Black disability community were these common narratives. So this is a photo of a Black kid who is no longer with us, Stefan Watts. Some of you may be familiar with this story that happened a few years ago, in 2015, I believe. And this was not long after my son was diagnosed. Black, autistic, killed by the police. He was autistic, and there are different, as we know, autism is a spectrum. So some people, call certain aspects of autism Asperger's, and he was diagnosed with that when he was 9. And, living as an autistic kid in a Black family can be a very interesting space. Often Black kids are stigmatized for their disabilities, for expressing themselves differently, and they're often subjected to these very ableist specifications that, well, because you don't necessarily behave normal like a normal kid, you're bad, you're wild, you're acting out, we don't understand you, so you need to be fixed because you're broken. And so oftentimes this is the narrative that we constantly see tangled and wrapped up with, like, our Black disabled kids, like especially those who operate differently. So this was a really heavy story for me to really to try to be a practicing artist, to try to uplift, like, the disability community, students. These were the narratives that were so heavy and that were really affecting me, like, and just my ability to exist and to feel that my son could exist, so hopefully that he wouldn't have a very negative encounter with the police. So that really, so those really oppressive narratives really empowered me to really dig deep and to really decide, especially with what happened last summer, and during the pandemic, as Marketa was saying, like, as artists, like, we really had to dig deep, and we really had to get a sense of, okay, well, what does our art really represent, and what do we really have to say as Black and disabled artists that are really going to uplift our community? Often when Black disabled voices are shuttered and are viewed as disposable, and our perspectives aren't always at the forefront. So what you see here on screen are pretty much experiments that I tried to do with, vector design and with digital, graphic arts and digital, graphic design, basically playing with language, you know, basically trying to exert, you know, neurodiversity and how empowering that particular word is when it comes to disability culture. So to be pro neurodiversity is to be anti-racist. So in other words, if you accept folks' differences, if you accept their disabilities and they're also Black, that means that there's no room for any racism to exist. Like, your racism really isn't justified if someone has a cognitive disability. Um, and so I ran with this design. It was really supported within the disability community. I had free posters that folks could actually download and color. And this is how I spent a lot of last spring and last summer, was really, you know, inviting people into my studio space and in my home, and sharing graphics, sharing resources, because it's important that everything that I was creating, everything that I was making, again, was really meant to uplift and amplify the Black disability culture and what we really represent. But it was really important that, you know, a Black disabled person was really at the helm of helping to get all of these really strong narratives out there. So my friends over in London at Heart Club Gallery in London, they're a gallery that works with a lot of folks who have cognitive disabilities, whether it's, you know, a disability that was rooted in like brain trauma, or whether it's something that's like Parkinson's or psychosis, or folks who are autistic, or folks who have ADHD. And so the gallery already features like some of my work. And then when I started sharing these graphics online, they were like, Jen, we really want to partner. We want to collaborate. We're planning like a huge, you know, Black Disabled Lives Matter protest. Can we use your design? And can we just spread it like all throughout London? And I was like, of course, like, y'all are family. So they took the design, they printed Brizo posters out. They were able to, you know, they like their entire gallery front, they wheat pasted it on behind their glass window. And this is like what you see on the left hand side is the front of the gallery, and then a group of folks from the community with different aspects of the poster and different statistics on Black disability, you know, state violence, and how up to 50% of all people killed by U.S. police are often disabled. And some of y'all may doubt that percentage, but it's really true, because think about, you know, Black folks who don't even necessarily know that they're disabled, or they're not necessarily disclosing their disability. And as we know, you know, there are certain elements of mental illness that are left often undiagnosed that affects so many Black folks. And so the same weekend that protest was happening in London, in Washington, D.C., which is about 45 minutes from where I live, and it's where I grew up, because I'm currently in Baltimore. You know, I got a chance to connect with a huge group of disabled advocates to march in DC, and we marched from the American Disabilities headquarters all the way down to the White House. And we were able to really like just unite. And this was like all through the pandemic, but we knew that we wanted to just speak out. And so we were signing the names of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor all the way down to the White House. And it really showed a lot of folks that disabled folks could actually, you know, exist. And so you can't really tell here, but my friend Jordan, she's the woman with the sunglasses. She actually is holding a cane. And then my friend Carrie on the left-hand side actually has, she has like an actual attached leg, you know? But you really can't see it like in the actual, in the photograph. But it's a really beautiful space that it was in, to be in that day, to just be around so many disabled folks. And a lot of folks had reached out to me even after that in the next subsequent week, saying, look, like, we have like our own Black disability culture and Black disability community here. So a good friend Luciana, who is in Brazil, reached out to me and said, Jen, can you translate like the actual language of Black Disabled Lives Matter into Portuguese, because we really want to like uplift like the Black disability community here as well. And I was like, no doubt, I got you. So it's been really beautiful to watch people transform the symbol onto many different, you know, elements in many different mediums. And I've done prototypes for mural designs, things that I want to be able to build, because I want for the symbol to continue to represent the Black disability community as like this symbol of solidarity, and then also as like a really like as a rallying cry. This is the Berkeley Museum of Art. They contacted me and wanted to project the symbol on their outdoor projection kiosk that they have outside of their museum. So the symbol has really been able to just really embolden not just myself, but so many folks. And it's really like taken over, like it's taken the world by storm. And it's like a really huge honor to be able to again, to create a symbol of solidarity that just represents so much unity. So on the left-hand side, this is my son, Kevin. His nickname is Knox. And he's actually wearing the same shirt that I'm wearing, which is Black Disabled Lives Matter, because I had like, and it was never even intended, the symbol was never even intended to be on like a t-shirt. It was always intended to just be on, you know, just shared like through social media as like a form of like virtual and digital activism. But you know, people were wanting to be able to have other aspects of a tactile exchange with the actual symbol, because they really wanted to rock their solidarity. And as I was talking about earlier, it's so important that images and language continue to really uplift like this culture that we really want for people to pay attention to, and that we want to let them know that we exist. And so when my son was diagnosed when he was 3, you know, instantly a lot of families are thinking that the world is over for their disabled kids, because we're really conditioned to think that, you know, to think that they're not going to be accepted, that they're not going to be loved. And I really wanted to create a visual narrative that was really going to break that stigma. And so in 2018, what you see on the right-hand side is my first book entitled Knox Rocks, which is a play on his nickname. That is really a love letter like to the disability community. And museums have actually been a really beautiful space that we could just find like aspects of beauty within those spaces. And so in the book itself, in the actual photo zine itself, it shows my son in some of our favorite museum spaces. So this is at the Baltimore Museum of Art, in front of some really beautiful like light installations. And one of the things that I really wanted to highlight and show in the book was, you know, my son being able to kind of just exist as a beautiful Black autistic kid within these beautiful spaces. And this is at the National Museum of the National African American Museum in DC. And this is like a really amazing photo by Matt Herron, the photographer who documented a lot of civil rights marches and exchanges. And this is actually one of the freedom marches from from Montgomery to Selma. So this is a really beautiful exchange. And it's like, it was amazing when I told him to go in front of that image and to kind of just stand there, because I wanted to document like that exchange. He felt like, and he wasn't even really communicating as much at this time verbally, but he knew, he was like, I see people who look like me, and they're like, you know, they're marching towards something, and they're also making a declaration of unity and of acceptance. And you know, he imitated that. And I wanted to make sure that that was captured in the book. And so again, like just more spaces, like photography has been a really amazing tool for me to be able to just showcase and highlight what autism is, and how beautiful it is if we just let it show for something that it can truly be. Oftentimes within like the autism narrative, we kind of see like the same kind of like very white centered narrative, where it's like either like a very hard triggering photograph that doesn't really amplify any kind of joy. But I really wanted for the actual images to be rooted in light and love and soulfulness and so much joy, like autistic joy. That's really what I wanted to capture. And then we have like just this is another museum, Baltimore Museum of Art, where we got a chance to see a lot of Black art. And so it's really important that when it comes to our disabled kids, that they're exposed to Black artists, and we need to be able to see that depicted and made available to us in museum spaces. So I believe that museums have such a responsibility to really help set a cultural tone for the up and coming generation. And it's important that especially Black disabled kids like just see themselves represented in museum spaces. And so another really special moment for our family was the book that I showed you earlier. The Knox Rocks photo zine was actually picked up by the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and it's permanently archived in their special collections. And it was a really beautiful thing that happened, and our publisher was able to kind of make that happen. And because our publishers, Homey House Press, already has some narratives and some photo zines already archived, so it was beautiful that our photo zine could be a part of that canon. And I didn't know that the Met had like an actual independent family visit, for children on the autism spectrum. Like I had no clue. And I asked them, I said, I'm so happy that that the zine is archived. I actually want to come see it in person. Can you make accommodations for me and my family? And they were like, yep, we absolutely can. And that was the first time that I was actually able to feel like, wow, like a museum is actually like built for my family and built for me and our experience. And we were able to go to the library there. We were able to see the book and to hold the book. And I have my own copies, of course, but it was amazing to be able to kind of see it being recognized within that space. And especially, and they made the space ready for my son, and they had fidget toys, and they had books. They contacted me ahead of time, and they said, what are some of the things that he likes? What are some of the things that what are some of his favorite topics and subjects and books that we can pull out for him? And they had some really beautiful alphabet books, and as I said, fidget toys. So, and that they were able to kind of like make a part of the space for him, and so that he could just feel like, yeah, like this is me, and I'm able to kind of hang out within this space. So all of those narratives, like we take everywhere with us. Like this is like special shout out to CNN. This article actually just came out yesterday for World Autism Awareness Day, or what we like to call it, World Autism Acceptance Day. And so I wanted to share a special quote with you that I was able to provide to the journalist who contacted my family and asked us for our perspective. And so the quote that I provided, an amplification of autistic folks and neurodiverse families, was, my son is joyful and whimsical and always fun to be around. From the very beginning of his life, like I've worked to make sure that I'm giving him the tools to be confident in his identity and comfortable with his unique skills, and his differences and the beauty of the person that he is. And that's really what the work should be rooted in. It should be rooted in acceptance. It should be rooted in making sure that, as Marketa was saying, it's like, we're living differently, but we should have the same opportunities, and not necessarily we should be, spaces should be required to provide access to folks who are disabled, who are existing, in many different spaces, emotionally, physically, who are operating in a completely different way. The world really, the world needs to be accommodating to how we exist, not the other way around. And so access for me is really rooted in care, and making sure that first and foremost that care is seen and practiced within my family. And so I'm going to go through these next few slides quickly because I want to make sure that I'm still good on time. But I practice that access of care and access of truth with my students here at Bowie State. This is like right after Trump was elected into the White House, and we staged like a huge protest on campus. And, it was really important that the students and who all voted, and who all really felt like, wow, like they were thinking that with their vote that things were really going to change. But I was like, look, guys, we have to hold on to hope, and we have to realize that the future doesn't begin and it doesn't end with Trump. Like it really, the future can continue with you and how you guys are really going to shape this world long after, he's no longer existing or no longer in office. And so it was this quote is super important in terms of disability culture is not just about catching non-disabled people up with how to do accessibility better. It's really about the art that we create with access. So access really has an aesthetic. So everything that I create, whether it's like my own personal reflection on how I feel about the autistic community, I share that with my students. And this is one of my autistic students, Nicholas. And this is really important that I want to leave, behind in terms of pedagogies of care, like just like my manifesto really like as an educator is really rooted in pedagogies of care, access, vulnerability, that vulnerability is really important to truth and letting students know that they can really, hold space for that, so making sure that, that students are given space to contribute in various ways. And these are things that, folks like Marketa and myself are already doing. And, some people are good at writing, some people are good at drawing, some people are good at researching or providing support to classmates. All of these count, different modes of intellectual production are completely valid, whether it's quilting or whether it's digital art, whether it's painting, whether it's creating, like rooms that are full of tactile fidgets that where people can use them to communicate in really fun ways, or whether it's like a craft participatory and student-centered assignments, like narratives that are really rooted in unity. So these are actually like some of my students from Bowie State as we were getting ready to create a whole newspaper that was dedicated to voting. And so this like I gave students full authorship and full ownership to talk about voter suppression and immigration and about LGBTQ communities and how that's been reflected like in their own lives. And so this is really what my teaching work is rooted in. It's like really about helping the students activate change, activate those conversations, and authoring all of these really beautiful stories and narratives. So access is really rooted in wellness. Access is a way to orient and to even come to wonder about who, what, where, and when we find ourselves to be in social space. So my last few slides are dedicated to one of my favorite disabled designers and artists is Shannon Finnegan. Make sure you check their work out. And so, and these images specifically are important to highlight because they are within the actual museum institutional system, like they were installed in museums specifically to help ask museums questions about accessibility. So museum visits are hard on my body. Rest here if you agree. Oftentimes museums are supposed to be these spaces of wellness and of art and of vibrancy and a place where you can just escape, but oftentimes they are the most inaccessible spaces. And so I really love how artists can really transform what access can really mean for museum spaces. And so these were actually chairs that they constructed. It's a part of a series called the Anti-Stairs Lounge. And so this is like another space within the museum in service of the alchemy that happens when disabled people are connected. Um, and I really love like this paper installation, Students for Accessibility, Staff, Artists, Academics, Communities for Accessibility. And access also needs to be an ongoing collective practice, a culture, an aesthetic, and basis for transformative advocacy, you know? So that's really what we should be asking ourselves as artists and activists. Like, this is a culture, this is like a legit existence. It's like, it's a way of life, and it's not just a fad or a trend or a buzz. It's really transformative work. And we're really trying to like change things. So access is tied to social organization and even like a sense of belonging. So not only does Shannon really help to transform the conversation of indoor spaces, but she really helps to transform it in terms of what about all of these structures that are meant to be beautiful and that are meant to be quote unquote inclusive, but they're really meant to shut people out, especially people who have disabilities. So this is the I forget what this installation is called, but it's in New York, and it's called The Vessel, but I forget who the artist is. But there are no steps, there's no elevators, literally. So no person who has access to a wheelchair or who uses a wheelchair or who walks with a cane can actually be in this space because it's all stairs. And so what Shannon did was she staged this whole entire installation and community protest where everyone came out, and they were like, as long as I live, I will not go up a single step of the vessel, because it's a very exclusion or wow, I can't speak today. It's a very inaccessible space that where disabled people feel like they're literally like oppressed, and that wasn't necessarily meant for them. So access centered space means that flexibility, openness, and innovation are welcome and necessary. So how are you centering disability culture in your lives and in your art spaces? Like, that's really what I want to leave with y'all today. So like, are you centering disabled people like with what you're using to like advertise for your business or to advertise for your different museum events, you know? Like, how are you encouraging your students or encouraging other people to use disabled people as a part of the narrative, you know? So I always love to highlight spaces like Affect the Verb, which is a website that commissions disabled designers and visual thinkers and makers and photographers to actually photograph disabled people just being disabled and happy and amazing. And so this is like one of my favorite spaces. And because, you know, photography and design is so much a part of like my artistic process, I really wanted to like highlight what other disabled spaces are actually doing to activate conversations within the disability culture and community. And then my last, yeah. So, and then this slide is of a photograph of one of my favorite people in the world, Mariah Person, who's a Black and autistic woman and artist and student, and she does dance and she stages workshops on, you know, movement and freedom of expression when it comes to stimming, and how stimming can be like this practice of liberation when it comes to autistic culture, and all kinds. Accessibility is a really great space that helps to kind of like foster events that disabled people like Raya could actually like create. And, you know, whether it's a virtual, you know, event or whether it's like an in-person event. So just know that there are a lot of like disabled folks that are out there like creating spaces and creating monumental experiences so that Black people, especially Black, you know, disabled people, can feel seen and could feel uplifted. So yeah, I'm always dropping like stuff that my friends are doing. So I wanted to make sure that I like highlight these organizations. So thank you. I know that was a lot of talking and I shared a lot of stuff. But I just wanted to make sure that I just, uplifted like a little bit of what I do, and a little bit of like, how important disability culture is to me. So follow me. I'm on Instagram at JTKnoxRocks, and I'm also online at jenwhitejohnson.com. So yep. Thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jennifer. That was inspiring, to say the least. It is amazing to see how quickly and how widespread your graphic has really kind of taken the world by storm. And, I think it's one of these things that people, unless it affects them personally, I think people don't necessarily keep it at the forefront of their mind on their everyday lives, right? And so I think a simple graphic that, like what you have created, allows us to keep that more in the forefront of our minds when we see it in murals, or we see it in posters, or we see it online. I think it's something so minimalistic but yet so powerful, to be able to give us that message and that reminder every day. And one thing that you said is vulnerability is important to truth. And I really think that that's 100% accurate as an artist, but I also think it's very accurate as museum professionals. And I think that, we all have to understand that we're going to be vulnerable in some way or another, whether it's the artist who has to be vulnerable to talk about their condition, or if it's the museum professional who has to be vulnerable and say, look, I don't get it. I don't understand. I need to do some deep dive and research and talk to people and dialogue and, be okay with being uncomfortable, right? We all have different levels of understanding, and we're all coming at it from different angles. And I think that that whole idea of vulnerability kind of just is all around the board. And so I think that's a great segue to bring in the next panelist. Katy Menne is a curator of education in North Carolina. And what is so beautiful about this panel is that, we've had two artists who are very, very active in what they're doing and helping to share their message with the world. And now we're going to hear from Katy, who is actually a museum professional who is helping to change the landscape of museums, and what can that mean, and what can our spaces mean for people who are disabled, and how can we make sure that people who are disabled feel comfortable in them, right? So Katy, she earned her BA in history and master's in teaching secondary social studies at the University of South Carolina. Since 2011, she's been teaching informal, formal, and informal settings. She joined the staff at North Carolina Maritime Museum at Southport in 2018 as the Curator of Education, where she started inclusive and diversity initiatives, spearheaded the museum becoming the first certified autism center in the state of North Carolina, and has earned the distinction of certified educator by National Geographic. She was the 2020 recipient of the Southeastern Museum Conference's Emerging Museum Professional Award. Katy?
Thanks, Cassandra. So I am honored to have been asked to even speak on this topic. It's definitely something that's passionate for me, as I know you've heard from our first two people as well. Before I share my screen, I wanted to read off our American Indian Land Acknowledgement. At the museum that I work at in North Carolina, we are working very hard to make sure that we are acknowledging our the ancestral land that we sit on now. So this is something that we have worked with some people in our department to write, and I'm going to read it for you, and then I'll share my screen. The North Carolina Maritime Museum at Southport sits on the ancestral lands of historical indigenous tribes, including those of Siouan indigenous lineage. Their early history has been mostly invisible, forgotten, and has not been completely written. During the colonial era, complex violence and sustained displacement and removal was forced upon these people. Much important information was lost. Today, North Carolina recognizes this broad contemporary indigenous land as Cape Fear, with American Indians living in all 100 counties and urban areas. We invite you to return to your institution and community, learn about the indigenous people that lived on the land, and engage and support the recognition and respect for those people. Join us in making today's Native American Indian people visible, included, and fully served in your activities, communications, and media expressions, and in the mission of your institution. So I've tried to read that off as much as I can whenever I'm speaking with people, especially because a lot of you may not know exactly where I am located. So because we are from all over, I'm gonna turn off my subtitles. They auto go on for you. I wanted to give you kind of so you can see where I am. This is the Maritime Museum in Southport. It's a whitewashed brick building and white siding. We've got a beautiful blue sign that says North Carolina Maritime Museum at Southport, and there's really bright, vibrant green trees and grass and a bench and some beautiful flowers that you walk into the museum in. You are in the midst of nature. So just so everybody's on the same page, I do talk rather quickly, so please do let me know if I need to repeat anything when I finish. But basically, I'm gonna just tell you what we do here and kind of how it got started and what's on the horizon for us next. This is a different angle of the same entryway of our museum. So you see that blue sign in the opposite side of the picture, and we've got the great Carolina blue sky on the day we took a picture of our flagpole. So originally I'm from California and then moved to South Carolina, and now I'm in North Carolina. So if you can't pick out where I sound like I'm from, there's probably good reason for that. I've lived all over. Makes interesting to edit captions for me. So give you a little bit more idea of where we are from wherever you're tuning in. North Carolina is the red state on the screen. I have gotten in the habit of doing this for whenever I'm talking to groups that are outside of North Carolina. We've got a great big red push pin showing you exactly where Southport is. We are in the southeastern corner of the state, fairly close to the South Carolina border. And the rear of our building is the picture you see on the screen. Again, we are a whitewashed building in downtown Southport, and what's sticking up from our roof is a periscope. So we do have a way to see 360 degrees of our area here. And we get all three types of water, so we get all sorts of boats to look at too. So our mission here is to collect, preserve, and interpret material culture pertinent to the maritime history of the Lower Cape Fear region for all people. Let me go back to that. So we have to talk about boats, but the way we talk about boats and nature and lighthouses and anything else that has to do with the water is kind of open to how we decide to do it. So as Cassandra said, I've been here since 2018 and my background is in history and in teaching. So in order to get my master's, I had to teach in public schools. So I taught middle school and high school. And what I learned very quickly is that when you are partnered with a teacher, they assign you the kid that either drives them crazy, needs special attention, or just needs someone to just sit near them and encourage them. So the students that I worked with quite often were undiagnosed with some learning disability. And being that I had a lot of classes talking about how to teach people and children specifically, I got to see firsthand exactly how so many different students were learning. And it was one-on-one because it was typically the students that the teacher was like, I have all of these other kids I need to teach. So can you go sit with that person? So for me, when I came here, I don't have all the fancy words to tell you exactly how I teach. I kind of went with the thoughts and overarching ideas. My goal as an educator and as a museum professional is to create a welcoming environment, to offer opportunities to learn where they are comfortable, and to empower fellow staff, board members, and volunteers to engage with diverse audiences. So I am very passionate about this. My goal is whenever somebody walks in our building that they will learn something, they will not be uncomfortable, they will feel very welcomed and included. And it has been so much fun to learn different ways to make that happen. So being that I have a teaching background, I was most comfortable talking about neurodiverse communities. So that's where we started this process. I came to so there's only 3 staff members here. I think that's very important to note that I am a department of 1, teaching programs, a lot of media, any sort of interactive elements that falls under my umbrella. Museum professionals all wear different hats and there's no exception here. I pitched the idea of starting a sensory Saturday. I think about 6 months into me being here. I thought, well, maybe we need something else, something that's free. Anybody can come, but we'll dim the lights. We won't turn on any audio, and I'll put out a free craft or activity and sit there, and whoever wants to walk up to the table can walk up to the table and participate. And it was really a way to just let's just talk. I don't need to have a seated program to teach you. I think it's way more fun to sit there and let's play, let's do something and learn. And it's not like class, right? I got into this profession because I love teaching, but I didn't want to be stuck in a classroom. I wanted to be able to go all over. And so since January of 2019, we have run Sensory Saturday, the first Saturday of every month. I will say that there were a couple of months during COVID, the beginning part when we were temporarily closed, and I was so overwhelmed, I didn't know which way was up, that we kind of just stopped, and I was like, I need to figure out the best way to make this happen, but we need to pause this. Since then, that has springboarded onto all sorts of other opportunities that we've done. And I will say that as a museum professional, this is not my expertise. I am not an expert on autism spectrum disorder or sensory processing disorder. It is a lot of, I have questions, I'm going to Google it. It's a lot of asking parents in our community and joining different organizations to learn for myself and bring back to the museum. So through this, I've joined a variety of different special needs groups and councils and coalitions to be able to know what other resources are out there and how the museum can assist. So we are not somewhere where we're going to offer therapy. That's not our background. What we're doing is how can we make this accessible, right? How can we welcome all people into this building and they're still going to learn? So one of the great resources we use is Libraries and Autism. It's a free resource online that gives you all sorts of stuff to use. So we've created a My Museum book. That's for me in the lower right-hand corner. It shows a picture of the exterior of our building, as well as our logos. What we've kind of dubbed is, we do a lot of maritime puns, a lot of water puns. So we say, whatever wave brought you here, you belong with our crew. And it shows a whole bunch of variety of boats and lighthouses and aquatic creatures that, whichever one's your favorite, hey, you can come hang out with us. And this one is the COVID-19 edition. So when we did start to reopen, we made sure that we put in there when we would be cleaning, some of the restrictions on things you can touch versus what you can't. Because before it was touch anything you want. And then as we were reopening, we did have those restrictions. And so this is something that I downloaded off of Libraries and Autism. It was a grant funded project. So it's free. You can do it. You can download one and create it for anything. This is emailed out or sent to families or groups that I've identified that either a participant is on the spectrum or they're a little nervous. We've never been here. What should we expect? This lives on our website. It also lives on our Facebook as a photo album so that anybody can click through the pictures, see where restrooms are, see what to expect when you come in. Often there's pictures of me. The COVID edition, we've got pictures of all the staff with and without masks to make sure that you can kind of see we're not as scary as it looks when you do have masks on. We did become the first certified autism center in the state of North Carolina in March of 2020, exactly 7 days before we went into temporary closure. So while we were super sad that we couldn't like fully roll this out and like celebrate the hard work of our volunteers and our board and our staff, we got to figure out how to do inclusion work virtually. That's a big order to fill. It's very difficult. It took a lot of like, what do you think we should do? And so I'm proud to say that I think we've done a pretty good job adapting to the virtual world. We describe pictures on screens when I'm reading books. We offer a variety of different craft opportunities with different, can you use scissors? Do you have markers versus crayons? Like all different options. And I always put like, hey, Miss Katie, I'm going to use a marker because I feel like using markers today. But then the next week, I might not feel like that. And I'm going to use colored pencils. And so we ran a toilet paper tube craft every Friday for 7 months with very basic craft supplies that people would have at their house. So it was pens. Do you have sticky notes? Do you have scissors? What do you have at your house? Let's figure it out and let's make something. But they still learned maritime. You still did a craft. You still laughed along with me because I quite often never practiced these beforehand. So it was also me trying to figure out, what did I just do? That didn't make any sense. And so when we were going into reopening times, I reached out to Cape Fear Community College because I thought, hey, we need to take this a step further. We've done the Sensory Saturday thing. We've done the Certified Autism Center. What else can we do? Well, I think a sensory backpack would be awesome. I think that there should be something that people can play with. And maybe it's just your kid doesn't like, even if you're not diagnosed, I just want something to play with. I want to walk around and fidget with something. So we partnered with Cape Fear Community College and their occupational therapy assistant program, had 4 of their interns come in and not only audit our facility for physical accessibility, but also put together some of these backpacks, tell us what we needed to put in them and why. So I very specifically said, I want written out in full sentences why we should be buying this versus this. And so every item that is in these bags, and we have 8 of them now, have a very specific reason as to why it's helpful. Most of them have noise canceling headphones. They all have some version of sunglasses. And then everything else is a variety of things to squish, things to move around. We did not do anything like chewies where you put it in your mouth because we thought even in non-COVID times, that is really hard to keep clean, and I would not want to put that back in my mouth if somebody else had it in theirs. So the main picture in the center is where 6 of our backpacks live now. We've got a big sign across the top that welcomes people. It tells them these are free, donations are appreciated, but it is a free resource. You can check one out. You can check out one of our iPads and take an ASL signed tour of our exhibit hall. And then to come, we've got a sensory walk that was designed by one of those interns that'll be put out once it gets a little bit warmer and restrictions here in North Carolina continue to be lessened. And then we also are in the process of building a sensory room. So we are wanting to make sure that there's a specific designated place that people can go and chill out. Maybe we've got this really awesome hug boat. And I think honestly, my boss and I have enjoyed it way more than we should have because we are both grown adults and we were like, there's no like weight restriction on that. Should we try it? Because I think we should try it. And so we would go and lay in it and the other one has to roll us out because we're adults in a hug boat. But when we started doing programming, I listened to a webinar about, good, better, best. How do you want to approach programming in a museum for people? So it's great to have specialty programs, but where you want to move is total inclusion, that you are offering something for everybody at every program. And so what we started to do was noting, first of all, that all abilities are welcome. It seems like a very basic thing to add that to your marketing. It works, it helps. It shows that we are specifically stating that everybody can come. And while you might think that that's common sense, for families that either have a family member or they themselves are diagnosed, or maybe they're not diagnosed, but to see that gives that level of comfort. And I will make the caveat that I do not have any diagnosed disabilities. This is something that I come from a teacher perspective and as an educator, and wanting to make sure that all of the attendees of our programs have the same access to learn and be comfortable wherever they are. So we have done a lot with the neurodiverse communities. We've done, I know that there's more, there's always going to be more, but this is something that we feel very comfortable with. Our staff has gone through trainings. I constantly am finding either webinars or articles to send to them and say, hey, here's something new. Here's what you should do. Here's what you shouldn't do. Things have changed. We have retired teachers who will tell us, well, that's not how we did it when I was in the classroom. And I said, hey, and I totally get that, but the current standard is this, and this is what we're asking you to do. If you're uncomfortable with that, come get somebody else. I will lay on the floor with anyone. And if that's where that child or that person is comfortable, I will do it. No questions asked. And so it's been something that the staff has gotten more comfortable with, the volunteers have gotten more comfortable with. And so we will get full programs from a group home, from an exceptional children's class. I often will say when I'm going to classrooms, when I was able to, that I would say, do you have any other classes you'd like to include? I was like, do we need to like rope in our exceptional children's classes? And teachers have said like, oh, well, we didn't really think about that. And I was like, oh yeah, bring them all in. We're good. Like, why not? Like, why are we keeping separate when we all want to learn about a dugout canoe? And those are the classes and the programs that have been so much more fulfilling, because then you've got all different personalities of this classroom. And it's been a ball having all of these fourth graders like crazy about dugout canoes. So that's where we started. We then started moving into more physical accessibility. About a year and a half ago, probably closer to 2 years now, we had a family come through that was signing ASL. Now I have at some point had very basic knowledge of ASL and was able to sort of introduce myself, sort of understand, but not nearly enough to feel comfortable with interpreting. That was not a thing for me. That is where I want to be. This is a goal of mine, is to take American Sign Language classes and feel much more comfortable. But for about a year and a half, this family of 3 has stuck with me. And I have said numerous times, I felt like a failure. That family did not learn. That family, not that they did not learn, but we didn't reach them to the best of our abilities. We did not give them that same experience that other patrons have had. And so while we were still in temporary closure, I started the legwork to make a semi-guided tour with an ASL interpreter. So some of the pictures on the screen that you're seeing, for me, it's the lower right-hand corner. It's a woman in a black and white checkered shirt and another woman in a cream colored shirt with some flowers in like oranges and yellows. To me, those are the colors that I see. The woman in the cream colored shirt with the dark hair is our interpreter, Lisa, and she brought her mom. Her mom is deaf, and she worked with us to create this semi-guided tour. It's not every word on every panel, but it is a start. Since we did not have a request for this, we had no idea how this would go. We didn't know how well it would be received. It has spoken English, captions, and an ASL interpreter. So it is free and accessible to anyone that comes through. Right now, we've got it on QR code that you can scan on your personal device or rent an iPad, check out an iPad. And then in March, I guess mid-March, the Department of Health and Human Services for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing came through. Now they were in the planning stages of this initiative, but we wanted them to come through and be like, all right, now take it. We've had this, we rolled it out in November, freshly reopened. We said, well, we're going to reopen and be the most accessible museum because we've just had 6 months to figure out what we needed to do. So the other picture on the screen is when the Department of Health and Human Services came through. Daisy is signing, giving me a plethora of great ideas that we are now going back through the tour to add in some of these. We had a couple of other attendees from that department. However, they were zipping through and learning stuff and coming back to ask questions. And the one thing that really stuck with me was that when Lisa took her mom through, she came back to me and said, you know, places don't have this sort of accessibility, that it's out there and in your face. Usually either you have to ask for it and they have to go find something, or they don't have anything. And she said that she's been to museums and parks and all sorts of stuff that don't offer this. And she said, I hope that this takes off. I hope that this is something that really, not only in North Carolina, but across the country and world, because she said, I've never been able to learn at the same time and in the same pace as my mother. I've always been interpreting. I've always had to figure it out and then translate. And it's speaking 2 different languages. That's hard. That's hard for anybody. And so that has stuck with me and driven us further to then move into the Department of Health and Human Services for the Services for the Blind. We had people come through our exhibit hall from that division and say, okay, what needs to change? What's good? What's bad? How can we make this better? And so some of the changes, we went from having metal footprints, which were white background with black words. We ripped those up. Those were Velcro to our carpet. We ripped those up, got stickers that laid flat. So it was not a tripping hazard anymore. And we inverted it so that it was a black background with white words. It was easier to see. It was a high contrast color difference. Also, the stickers are bigger than the original footprints. So that originally was an intern's project a few summers ago, and we took it the next step. One of the other things was putting boxes on the floor where we had hanging exhibits. They said, if you've got a sight cane and you're walking and you are relying on that sight cane, you're going to run into that exhibit before you realize that there's something there. And so any of our floating exhibits were like, okay, we've got to put something on the floor to catch that sight cane. We also, like I said at the beginning, we describe pictures on any of our books. I try my best to describe pictures when I'm giving presentations. We are also working with local colleges to get 3D printed items to add in a tactile element. We're doing a fully guided tour with very specific directions of walk to this sticker, turn to your 3 o'clock, and vividly describe what is there. That's something that I honestly am slightly uncomfortable with. I don't feel like my vocabulary is strong enough to describe something that I can see but somebody else can't. And currently reading lots of books about how to better explain what someone's looking at. And then it's of course a difference between if you were born blind or born deaf versus if you have gradually become blind or deaf. So one of the other things that's related to this topic is that we are currently asking for submissions from the LGBTQIA+ community for an art exhibit. We are looking to create greater inclusion with all people. We want to make sure that everybody, when they come in, that they find somebody or something that they can identify with and they can relate to. And so we have worked with a local organization called the Frank Carr Foundation. There's not a whole lot of resources and assistance for the LGBTQIA+ community here in the southeastern region of North Carolina. So we are asking for input. We're asking for this community to help us and tell us a little bit about their experience with the maritime community and how it relates to them, and kind of giving the other communities in this area a heads up that like, this is something we're doing. This is something we're going to be including in the future, and let's get you used to it now so that when we are including people within this community in our main exhibits, it's not something that's a shock to them. We do very much recognize we are still in the South. North Carolina, while I personally feel like it's not very Southern, geographically we are, and historically we are. And so we want to make sure that we are giving everybody a heads up that this is something we stand for. This inclusion for all people of the Cape Fear region are included and seen and taught and worked with. So those are very quickly the diversity items that we've done here. And so what's next? More. What else can we add? I've talked a little bit about future plans with our sensory room and our tour, 3D printed artifacts, future exhibit planning. The museum is on lots of different social media channels. We try and share out a lot of DEAI items, and you've got my contact information, but I know that with all of us, really, it's, you know, I think it's how can we share what we know for greater exposure, that we're really looking to make sure that everybody had, like Jen was saying, you didn't know that this was a thing. So when you took your son to the museum, you were like, oh, well, this was a pleasant surprise. And it's like, no, let's make sure that this is, everybody knows, like, yes, we are a place you want to travel to. Like, we want you to come here because this is what we stand for.
Thank you, Katie. I think that it's so important for people to understand in the profession and just in general that museums can be places that are inclusive, and, you know, not just inclusive because of race or gender or you know, things that we typically think of when we hear the word diversity, right? But can be inclusive for people of all walks of life, in all stages of life. And I think that it's very important that we all work towards that goal of, one, making sure our institutions meet those standards, but two, making sure that people are aware that these are things that we offer, right? So I think it's very important, and I am so admiring what you and your staff and your board and your volunteers are doing at your museum, because I think a lot of us in the museum profession really have quite a ways to go before we're where you guys are. I know that for the Montgomery Museum of Fine Arts, we are just kind of starting to walk that path a little bit. We have a sensory corner in our artworks, which is our children's specific area in our museum, which is temporarily closed due to COVID. But we have a sensory area where we've had someone recreate one of our most famous, not famous, but one of our most popular paintings in our permanent collection. And so they've recreated that in a very tactile way so that it's on the wall for people. We have created, there's like a little quiet space in there as well, but we also thought more broadly and thought, how can we make it more than just the children's area, right? Not everybody's necessarily going to go into the children's area. We need to have another space in our museum that's available. So we're currently working to create this new space. And so we've gotten funding from Art Bridges along with the Junior League of Montgomery to transform one of our spaces, which is, it used to be a green room off of our auditorium. And so we're transforming that space into this multi-purpose room. So it's a space that has enough room for some couches and chairs and lamps and things, but there's also a bathroom in there. And so it allows you to have a little bit more privacy, because one of the things that we noticed was that we have a lot of parents that come in with young children, and they don't necessarily feel comfortable having to change their children in a public restroom. I mean, anybody that has had a child and has had to do that knows it's not the best thing in the world. And so, so we started thinking about that. And then we started thinking about, okay, well, what if a mother comes in and she needs to breastfeed? Well, we don't have anywhere for the mother to do that. And so this kind of became a more larger conversation as to how can we transform this room into this multi-purpose space for people who have needs that are currently not being met at our museum. And so this is like our first step towards a larger inclusion initiative within our museum. But, as I said, we're still not quite where you guys are at. And hopefully we'll get there, and we're working towards that. And I really commend all the work that you guys are doing. And all of you on the panel today, you are all working tirelessly to help destigmatize disabilities, right? And I think that's so important, because oftentimes when we're talking about diversity, equity, access, and inclusion, it often skews towards race. It often skews towards gender. And I feel that, of course, those are two very important topics, but they're not the only topics, and they're not the only things we need to think about, and they're not the only things we need to talk about. So thank all of you for coming today and sharing what it is that you do, and sharing what your future plans are. So this is the section we're going to turn into a little bit of a moderated panel section. So the first question, Katy, how did you come to realize that inclusivity in your museum could be improved and needed to be improved?
So I think with the initial steps with the neurodiversity was really the students that I had taught in formal schooling, and like kids that were in our like programs here. It was okay if they were just like let loose in our museum, what would they really get out of it? What would they walk away with? And so I would walk through the exhibit hall and think, okay, my student that I had 4 years ago in 8th grade in Columbia, South Carolina, if they were standing here with me, what would I need to make this a good experience? And so that was really, it challenged me to think about teaching in a completely different way than you're taught in formal schooling, right? Like to teach high school, it's fairly specific, there are certain rules you have to follow. And so it was like, let's break all of those rules, because I can do that here. I can decide. And then with the others, it was kind of like these steps, right? Like the family that was speaking ASL to each other. And I was just trying to tell them where the bathrooms were, right? Like I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot remember any of this. And so that family has stuck with me. Putting our signage in English and Spanish was these are all small things, but it can make a big difference. And so once we started getting going, it was, okay, what's the next thing we can do? So like, okay, well, we are including the deaf communities. Well, that's only like a small population. Let's look at the blind or the low vision population. And then we're almost doing it flipped. So yeah, it's like you said, Cassandra, it tends to focus initially on race and gender. And I'm coming at it from a teaching perspective where it's like, okay, well, you can't learn anything here if you can't physically access it, or you don't have the ability to translate it into your language. And like the content we're also working on, it's not that we're avoiding that, but it's like simultaneously, how can we like talk to community members, I guess. It's a lot of observing. That was a very long answer. I apologize. It's a lot of observing people.
No, it was a good answer. And I think, the way you framed it as like, if that student was there with me, how would I have to interpret this for them, right? And I think that that's really interesting. And I think that's probably why maybe not a lot of cultural spaces are as inclusive as we can be and should be, is because if it's not something that you've experienced, if it's not something that you live with every day, it's not at the forefront, right? And especially if it's something that you can't see, right? If it's not like glaringly obvious, people don't necessarily think about, how do I make this person feel included? And so, Jennifer, that kind of brings me to my question to you is, as an artist that lives with these invisible disabilities, because they're not something that when you walk into the room, it's not something that people would know about you, right? So as an artist living with this, do you think that spaces often include or exclude people with these types of disabilities when they're thinking about inclusive environments?
Yes. Yeah, I think that we're definitely excluded, for what you had mentioned was because it's invisible. And then oftentimes, you know, folks like myself, oftentimes we don't even think that our disabilities are like valid because they are invisible, and that's something that I've had multiple conversations with like my other friends who have disabilities of all kinds and types. And to me, access is just more than a logistical conversation, but it's more of like a cultural conversation. It's like, okay, well, how can I step into this space and still feel at least like my people and like my culture are being represented? Which is why if there's any sort of, black and brown, you know, exhibition that's like really highlighting like, black art, brown art, whatever, because I come from like, an Afro Latina cultural background, I like rush to that exhibition because like I want to make sure that, they feel that the museum space has the support, that my family can feel represented and can feel seen. And if anything, like, yeah, like I feel like, okay, well, where is more of the artwork that is not so much just created for the disabled community, but where are our disabled artists and why aren't they being featured in more residencies and being seen? And oftentimes it's because we have to curate those spaces ourselves. And that is what I'm seeing. I'm seeing more of the disability community just deciding to just curate it ourselves, whether and so mapping access is a really great space that does like that does that. They have like these crip nightlife nights, and so mappingaccess.com. So they'll do like these remote access crip nightlife parties where everyone like they'll do like virtual karaoke, or they'll do like these little like movement parties or like STEM parties, and so where people can just feel activated to just be free, to just hold space for all of those fun like differences. And that has been very comforting. There's been a lot of disabled collectives that have happened through, like WhatsApp and like all these cool little digital spaces where people are just looking for any kind of digital connection because actually like, and those are things that the disability community has always been doing because we were never always able to just go to like any space because whether there weren't ramps or whether, the exhibition was like overstimulating to us, where we felt, and that was like an example that I showed you. It's like, sure, I want to go see this new painting, but I would have to stand in line for like 2 hours, if it's like, a Yayoi Kusama exhibition, like going to like one of those infinity rooms, and I stood in line for 2 hours because I was so excited. But then I kept thinking to myself, like, man, like how inaccessible is this? And then in the museum space, definitely like I was paying attention to like, were the infinity rooms wide enough so that disabled folks can actually like exist within the space and experience like this endless mirrored, beautification of light. And what I've been doing, like most of the exhibitions that I go to now are like interactive. So like Art Tech House, so Art Tech House in DC, and there's like a couple of other they have one in I don't know if it's like a new one in Japan. They have one in New York and Atlanta, I think, where they commission augmented reality based artists and virtual reality based artists, where they have like these really beautiful interactive simulated experiences where it's all based on like art and tech. Art Tech House recently did like the Van Gogh painting, where like it was like this 360 painting where we could like interact with the painting and see it come to life. And we could through our phones, we could download an app and then like upload like a piece of like the painting as well. And then they had like a fall exhibition where we could like create our own leaf, photograph it, and then upload it to like the system, and then the leaf would like come alive and the whole entire room would be filled with everyone's leaves. And so for me, it's like, I don't know, it's like as long as it's fun, as long as it's engaging. And they have like daytime hour exhibitions, so I could take my son and I can go when it's like less crowded. And then also, because the images themselves are really overstimulating, there's not a lot of loud noise, because that would be hard, like loud noise plus like overstimulating like imagery. So they know really well how to, you know, adapt to you know, folks who need that kind of like space and what needs to happen. So yeah, so I mean, I do my research in terms of what's going to be the best space for me. And is there going to be a long wait time? Am I going to be standing for like a really long time? Is there, like, you know, like Katie was saying, is there like a space where I can take a quick break and where I can kind of navigate, you know, to another area and feel like that I can still be comfortable and not feel like I have to go all the way out of my way and up 5 floors to like go to like a little break room. Because like I feel like most children's museums do an amazing job. Like we have like Port Discovery here in Baltimore, and they have like a fully soft room that's like super tactile. And I end up having more fun at that museum because I can just kind of like lay out and just like, you know, be super comfortable and roll around with my kid than going to like an institution where I'm like standing. And I'm super excited to see the artwork at most institutions, but I feel so like heavy, like, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm just so done, I'm done. Which is why like I talked about Shannon Finnegan's work, and I kind of showed like their response, you know, to how sometimes inaccessible museum spaces can be. But I really appreciate what Maritime is doing, because I'm like, yay, like now, like, and we want to do a road trip because my parents are in Orlando and we haven't been able to see them. And that would be fun to like kind of pass through the museum like on the way, because my son, he would just love that. Anything that is where he can learn something new and different and be engaged with a space. And it's so important because what the museum accomplishes really helps to fulfill all 5 senses, which is so important. So it's like scent, sight, smell, like touch. Like those are things that I'm always looking for as a, you know, a person who's disabled and who's looking for that kind of fulfillment. I'm like, will this exhibit, or even not just the exhibit, but will my experience here like impact like all 5 senses, you know? So I hope that kind of answers it to a degree.
Yeah, no, it really did. And I think, you know, you talked about loving to be able to go into space that is soft and more tactile, and, you know, being able to be a little bit more comfortable and things like that. And what I find interesting is spaces where they have those things and people purchase them versus what Marquetta does, which is she creates them, right? So Marquetta, can you talk a little bit about the difference between, you know, what you're creating for spaces like this and, you know, kind of store-bought, not necessarily cookie cutter, but, you know, you could get it out of a catalog. Like, what is the difference? Are you able to, is it because you're able to work with the staff and kind of tailor it a little better, or, you know, speak a little bit about that?
I think that all of those things kind of came into play. Originally, when the High Museum talked with me about the possibility of doing uh, things for their sensory room, we were thinking about the gamut of experiences that students that are living with disabilities could possibly have. We wanted to give them things that they could feel, that they could touch, things that they could see. You know, we're a museum, so we're all about seeing, right? But seeing in maybe new ways, seeing in such a way that we're using colors that are really contrasting so that it's easier for people with low vision to be able to read text, to be able to do things that would actually encourage parents and families and students to be able to develop their vocabulary of their sensory vocabulary, you know, instead of just being able to say, well, oh, you know, I like this, but being able to actually quantify or to describe what it is about this experience that they really love. Now, as far as, you know, trying to do and aim to different communities amongst people that are living with disabilities, you know, being able to hand make a fidget gives you the opportunity to think about things that impact students that are really living with autism. Like some kids might not want to touch anything that's really rough, you know, or smells might disturb, or flashing lights might disturb. So as I'm creating my fidgets, I have an opportunity to tailor them to the needs of the students that are actually going to be using them, you know. And if you notice or remember from one of my last slides when I showed my fidgets, I'm not focusing on plastic. I'm focusing on fibers. I'm focusing on fabrics. I'm focusing on things that uh, you could spray Febreze on, or that you might be able to toss into the washing machine. And I think it makes all the difference. And things that are made by hand carry a certain kind of energy, an energy of love and appreciation. One of the students from the Center for the Visually Impaired, when he saw all of the fidgets that I made, he said, "You made this just for us?" You know, and it really warmed my heart because of the fact that I had an opportunity right then to see how my creativity could actually make the world a better place, could impact someone's life in a beautiful way, a sharing and kind of caring that we can foster in our institutions. The High Museum in Atlanta is very, very committed to bringing programming and experiences to families that are inclusive in every way, not just with ramps or with doors that open by themselves, but to actually think about the height of a person sitting in a wheelchair when they're looking at a work of art, or to think about how the things that they do to be inclusive really makes it better for everyone. Because if you put a pedestal down low for a person that is using a wheelchair, it also is low for a young child to be able to actually see every aspect of a work of art. So being able to participate in making that happen, to make a museum a more welcoming, family-centered place full of compassion and striving to edify the community, has been a wonderful experience for me. And I've even taken this whole idea of sensory into my own artwork, because the question arises, what is beautiful to someone that has low vision or no vision? It's totally different from a person that is just having a visual experience. So not only with working in the museum with tactile boards or fidgets, I also try to move that whole thing into my artwork to make my artwork more inclusive, to make my work more approachable. And I think it brings my work into the 21st century, because the 21st century is all about opening up the playing field for all people to be able to have experiences. And so with my needle and thread, I try to use that to sew a place for all students.
That's wonderful. I really think that the type of work that you're doing and really the heart and the care behind your work, to me, is so evident. And I think that is kind of what makes the difference between a space that someone can go and just kind of replicate versus a space that the people who are creating the space have really put some thought behind, right? What is their particular community need? What are the needs of the people who are going to be using that space, right? I think that is an important step in creating these inclusive environments, is not only taking a step back and looking at your institution and thinking, okay, where are our deficiencies? Where are we not quite doing things the right way? But also getting the input from your community, really understanding what it is that your community needs, right? And I think it's as simple as starting out with literally where you're located, right? Just your community to start with, because you can always then grow and expand, but you have to start somewhere. And I think having those one-on-one conversations with people, really getting to understand what it is that they wish your museum had or your institution had, because they want to go, they, like Jennifer said, they want to go, they want to see the art, they're excited about what's coming, but there's barrier X, Y, and Z in front of them, and so they don't go, or so they go, but their experience is not what it should have been, right? And so I think having these types of conversations, and having people talk about disabilities and having people talk about how all of this works together, like we're doing here today, I think is really important, because it allows us to start thinking about it in a more holistic manner, to start thinking about it in every aspect, in everything that we do. And so I just wanted to thank all of our panelists today for being here, talking with all of us about your passion and your interests, and how each and every one of you is really striving to make a difference in this world, and how each and every one of you truly are making a difference in this world. And I just want to thank you for taking time out of your Saturday to speak with us today and to speak with our audience. And I really hope that everyone who has been here throughout the program, whether you popped in and popped out, or if you stayed throughout, I hope that you enjoyed our conversation, our dialogue, and I hope that you have learned something, and I hope that you were able to walk away knowing that your institution down the road, or your cultural space, or your museum, we're trying. There are spaces that are trying for you, and also that we need your help. We want your help, and so we want your voice. And so I hope that those are two things that you're able to take away from the program today. And again, thank you all, and thank you to BBVA for sponsoring this program, and have a wonderful evening, everyone.